On the day of a grand wedding meant to unite wealth and power, a stranger stepped from the shadows and shattered the silence. What began as a celebration turned into a storm of secrets, betrayal, and truths long buried. In a world where love and loyalty are tested against greed and pride, one voice was enough to change everything. The night before the wedding, the city did not sleep. Lagos was wrapped in a heavy sky, a kind of dark velvet pressing down on the glittering streets. Neon signs flickered on high-rise towers, cars crawled through endless traffic, and on the island where the rich held their celebrations, music could already be heard echoing from the waterfront halls. Daniel stood at the edge of this world, half hidden in the shadows of a narrow alley. His shirt was frayed at the cuffs, his shoes worn through at the soles. He carried no invitation, no flowers, no gift, only a truth that burned in his chest like a wound. He had not slept in days. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's face, not as he remembered it in life, but the way it looked that final morning, pale and still, hidden away by people who had money enough to bury secrets. Everyone else believed his father was gone. Everyone else had accepted the story told by the millionaire who now stood at the center of tomorrow's celebration. Daniel whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, "They don't know. He's alive. I have to make them see." The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of salt water from the lagoon. A bus rattled past, its headlights flaring, and for a moment the boy's reflection appeared in a broken window, gaunt, tired, but determined. He remembered the first time he had entered the world of the wealthy, by accident, when his scholarship had allowed him a single year at the elite university. That was where he had seen them. The rich families, their sons and daughters dressed in fine linen, speaking softly as if the air itself belonged to them. And there, too, he had met her, Amara. The name alone carried a kind of ache in him, like music that refused to end. She was the daughter of the man whose wedding tomorrow would be celebrated like a coronation. Amara had once looked at Daniel with kindness in her eyes, but kindness was fragile in that world. It was easily broken by whispers, by status, by fear. Now she was marrying another, a man with wealth carved into his smile and power stitched into his suit. Daniel knew it was not love that bound her, it was expectation, pressure, the heavy crown of a family name. Yet Daniel could not think of Amara tonight. His mind circled only one truth. His father was not dead. He had been hidden, locked away, his life stolen so the millionaire's secret could remain buried. And tomorrow, before all of Lagos, Daniel would tear open that secret.
Morning arrived with a pale, reluctant sun. The streets shimmered with heat as guests began arriving at the grand hotel on the island. White banners fluttered in the sea breeze, chandeliers glowed even in daylight, and the marble steps leading up to the hall shone as though polished by hand for weeks. Inside, violins rehearsed quietly. Waiters moved in silence, their trays heavy with wine glasses. The air was thick with perfume and the scent of roses, imported by the truckload to decorate every corner. Amara sat in a private room, her wedding dress spread around her like a sea of ivory. Her eyes were distant. She looked at the mirror, but she did not see herself, only a stranger shaped by silk and diamonds. Her hands trembled as she held the veil. She thought of Daniel once, the boy who had spoken with fire in his voice, who had believed in justice even when it cost him everything. But Daniel was gone from her world, vanished like a dream she had never dared to chase. Outside the hall, however, Daniel was very real. He stood among the workers unloading flowers in crates, his heart beating like a drum in his chest. No one noticed him. To them, he was just another tired laborer. The ceremony began. Guests filled the seats, their laughter echoing through the gilded hall. The groom stood tall, adjusting his cufflinks, his smile a practiced weapon. The millionaire father beamed beside him, soaking in the admiration of every eye. And then, as the priest's voice rose and Amara took her first step down the aisle, Daniel moved. He stepped into the hall, his voice breaking through the silence like a strike of thunder. "Stop this wedding!" Every head turned. Murmurs rippled like a storm through the crowd. The guards rushed forward, but Daniel's words froze them in place. "He's alive!" Daniel shouted, his voice raw, his eyes locked on Amara's. "The man you buried, the man you lied about, he's alive, and I can prove it." Gasps filled the hall. The millionaire's face drained of color. Amara's steps faltered, her veil slipping from her hands. The world seemed to stop. The silence inside the hall was suffocating. The violins had stopped. The priest lowered his book, his hands shaking slightly. No one dared to move. Daniel stood in the middle of the aisle, his chest rising and falling like he had run a marathon. He could feel the heat of hundreds of eyes pressing against him, yet his gaze clung only to Amara. Her lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came out. The groom's jaw tightened. His voice sliced through the air. "Who is this boy? Guards, remove him!" Two men in dark suits stepped forward, but Amara lifted her hand, delicate, trembling, and whispered, "Wait." Her voice carried farther than she expected. Everyone heard it. The guards stopped, uncertain. Daniel's voice broke again, urgent, pleading. "They told you my father was dead. They buried an empty coffin, and you all believed it. But I've seen him. He's alive, locked away, hidden so no one would know the truth. This wedding," he pointed toward the millionaire, his hand shaking, "is built on a lie." The room erupted into whispers, disbelief rippling like fire across dry grass. The millionaire stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the marble. His face was red with rage, but his smile was still fixed in place, a mask he had worn for decades. "This is madness," he declared. "My daughter's wedding will not be ruined by the delusions of a beggar." But his voice lacked its usual authority. There was a tremor beneath the words. Daniel felt his knees weaken. For a moment, doubt clawed at him. Had he gone too far? Would they laugh at him, drag him out, end everything before it began? Then he remembered his father's eyes, the way they had met his own in the darkness of that hidden place. "Speak the truth," his father had whispered then, "no matter the cost." Daniel straightened, his voice steadied. "I can take you to him, right now." Gasps. A chair clattered to the floor. Someone muttered a prayer under their breath. Amara's veil fully slipped from her hair and landed silently at her feet. She stepped forward, ignoring her father's hand reaching to stop her. For the first time that day, her voice rang clear. "If this is a lie, we will know. If it is not, then everything I thought I knew is already broken." Her words cut deeper than Daniel's accusations. The millionaire froze. His jaw tightened. His groom's hand trembled against his cufflinks. The priest closed his book. "Then let us see." The sun was beginning to sink,
as the caravan of expensive cars rolled reluctantly through the crowded streets. At the very back, squeezed between security guards who eyed him with suspicion, Daniel sat rigid, his hands clenched into fists. Beside him, Amara sat in silence. She had not changed from her dress, though the train had been gathered and pinned to keep it from dragging on the dirty road. Her fingers played nervously with the lace at her wrists. Every so often, her eyes flickered toward Daniel, but she did not speak. The millionaire rode ahead in a sleek black car, windows tinted so no one could see his face. They drove far from the glittering island, past the markets, past the noise of the city, into the edges where streetlights grew dim and walls cracked under years of neglect. Daniel's chest tightened as the path became familiar, the way to the abandoned compound where he had first found his father. The convoy stopped before a rusted gate. The guards muttered in confusion. This was no place for billionaires and brides. Daniel stepped forward. His voice was hoarse. "He's inside." The lock clanged as one of the guards forced the gate open. The air inside was heavy, smelling of damp and dust. Rats skittered across broken tiles. They followed Daniel through dark corridors until they reached a narrow room at the back. Daniel paused, his breath shallow. His heart pounded so hard it almost drowned the silence. Then he pushed the door open. On a thin mattress, surrounded by shadows, lay a man. His beard was overgrown, his skin pale, but his eyes were alive. "Papa," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. The man stirred, blinking against the sudden light. His voice cracked, but it carried. "Daniel?" The hall of onlookers gasped as though they had all witnessed a ghost. Amara's hand flew to her mouth. Even the millionaire stumbled back, his mask of control slipping. It was true. The man they had buried was here, breathing, alive. The room seemed to hold its breath. Dust floated in the shaft of light cutting through the broken window, every particle glittering as if time itself had slowed. Daniel fell to his knees beside the mattress. His hands shook as he touched his father's arm, afraid that even now it might vanish like smoke. "You're here," he whispered, his voice a mixture of awe and grief. "They told me you were gone. They buried you." His father's fingers trembled as they rose, brushing Daniel's cheek with a tenderness too fragile for words. "They wanted me gone," the older man murmured, "but truth is harder to kill than flesh." Amara stepped closer, the train of her dress dragging across the filthy floor. The sight of her white silk against the dirt was surreal, like a flower blooming in ash. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on the man before her. "This can't be real," she breathed. "Father said—" Her words broke, collapsing under their own weight. The millionaire himself did not speak. He stood at the threshold, his face tight, his hands clenched behind his back. Every line of his body screamed control, but his eyes betrayed something else, fear, sharp and corrosive. The groom was the first to break the silence. His voice was cold, sharp as glass. "This is a trick, some beggar dragged from the street, dressed to resemble the dead. I won't stand here and let this madness—" But the man on the mattress lifted his head. His gaze, dim with exhaustion but clear with recognition, locked onto the groom. "I know you," he rasped. "I was silenced because of you." The words fell like stones into the room. Gasps spread among the witnesses. The groom paled. Amara turned sharply toward her father, her voice trembling but unyielding. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't hide him."
The millionaire finally moved. His polished shoes scraped against the concrete as he stepped forward, his voice booming not with authority but desperation. "Enough! This spectacle ends now!" He gestured to the guards, but they hesitated. Their eyes flickered between him and the living proof of his lie lying broken on the mattress. Authority could command many things, but it could not erase what their eyes had seen. Daniel stood, his body tense, his voice raw. "You buried him alive in silence just to protect your empire. You stole his voice, his life, and thought no one would ever know. But the truth is here, and it will not be silenced."
The following day, Lagos was buzzing. Newspapers carried whispers of the disrupted wedding, the mysterious man found alive, the billionaire's silence. Social media boiled with speculation, fragments of grainy photos and videos captured by guests already flooding the internet. And so the confrontation moved from the shadows of the abandoned house into the blinding light of a courtroom. Daniel had never entered such a place before. The marble floors gleamed, the wooden benches creaked under the weight of curious onlookers, and at the front, the judge's gavel struck like thunder. Amara sat near the front, her dress replaced by simple clothes, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. She no longer looked like the daughter of wealth, but like a woman torn between two worlds. The groom was absent. Rumors said he had fled the city. Daniel's father sat weakly on the witness bench, his voice frail yet steady as he told his story. How he had discovered fraud within the company, how he had threatened to expose it, how the millionaire had silenced him with bribes, then with force, until finally it had been easier to declare him dead. The courtroom listened in stunned silence. The millionaire sat at the defense table, his face carved from stone, but his hands betrayed him, drumming nervously against the wood. Daniel watched him, his own chest tight with anger and grief. But beneath the fury, something else stirred. A question, unwelcome yet insistent. If wealth and power could twist a man so far from his humanity, what would it take to untwist him? When the judge asked if Daniel wished to speak, he rose slowly. His voice was soft at first, but it carried in the stillness. "I am not here for revenge. I am here for truth. My father's life was stolen, and with it years of dignity. What I want is not to destroy you, but to make sure no one else will ever be silenced this way again." The courtroom shifted. Some wept quietly. Even the judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with a mix of sternness and compassion. Amara lowered her gaze, a tear slipping down her cheek.
The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind that made every cough, every shuffle of feet, echo like thunder. Daniel sat again, his heart hammering against his ribs, while his father's frail figure remained at the witness bench. The judge's gavel tapped once. "The court has heard the testimony. Now we must hear from the accused." All eyes turned toward the millionaire. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, but his face had aged 10 years in a single night. For decades, he had built his empire on authority, on fear, on the certainty that no one would dare question him. Now, even his own daughter looked at him with eyes that demanded answers. He rose slowly. His voice was calm, but it carried the brittle edge of a man cornered. "I did what I had to do," he began. "A corporation, a legacy cannot be risked by the weakness of one man. He pointed at Daniel's father, his hand trembling, threatened everything. I could not allow that. Families depend on me. Thousands of workers depend on me. One man's silence was the price for stability." A murmur rolled across the benches. Some nodded, uneasy. Others recoiled. Daniel shot to his feet, fury surging through his veins. "You call it stability, I call it murder in slow motion. You locked him away as if his life was less than the paper you sign. That's not strength, that's fear." The judge struck the gavel sharply. "Order!" But Amara was already rising. Her voice, though soft, carried more weight than any gavel. "Father!" The word hung in the air, fragile as glass. He turned toward her, expecting loyalty, expecting silence. Instead, she met his gaze with eyes full of tears and defiance. "I loved you. I believed everything you said, but you taught me to value truth, at least once. Was that also a lie? Tell me, when you buried him, did you bury me too? Did you bury every part of us that was human?" The millionaire faltered. For the first time, his mask cracked. His lips parted, but no sound emerged. The silence was louder than confession. Amara's voice trembled. "If you wanted to save the company, you destroyed the family. You lost me the moment you chose power over truth." The trial dragged into evening. Lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the wood. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras flashed, and the air smelled of sweat and anticipation. Daniel's father leaned forward, exhaustion pulling at his frame. "I don't want vengeance," he said quietly, his voice cracking with age and pain. "I only want my life back, my name, and for my son to walk free of the chains you tried to bind me with." The judge studied the room for a long time, his eyes lingering on Daniel, then on Amara, then on the trembling figure of the accused billionaire. Finally, his gavel struck, each word heavy as stone. "This court finds you guilty of unlawful imprisonment, fraud, and conspiracy. You will face sentencing." The hall erupted. Some clapped, others shouted in anger, but Daniel heard nothing but the sound of his father's uneven breath. Relief, sharp and almost painful, washed over him. He turned toward Amara. Their eyes met. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, yet in her gaze there was something fragile and new, recognition perhaps, or a quiet apology that words could not carry. When the guards escorted her father away, she did not follow. She remained seated, staring at the floor, her veil of loyalty shattered. Afterwards, as the crowd dispersed, Daniel stood at the courthouse steps. The city spread before him in its chaos and neon light. His father leaned on him, weak but upright. Amara emerged from the doors slowly, her steps uncertain. She stopped before Daniel, her eyes searching his face. "I don't know what happens now, but I know you saved more than your father today. You saved me from living in a lie." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to say all the words that had burned inside him for years, but none came. Instead, he simply nodded, and in that silence, something began. Not love, not yet, but the faint shape of belonging, of hope. The city roared on around them, indifferent and alive, while three broken souls stood together on the steps of justice, bound not by blood or wealth, but by truth. Weeks had passed since the trial, yet Daniel still woke some nights with his heart pounding, convinced it had all been a dream. He would sit in the small rented room he now shared with his father, listening to the hum of the city outside the window, and remind himself, no, it was real. His father was breathing in the next room. The man who had been declared dead was alive again, fragile but free. The city did not change for their story. Buses still groaned down broken roads, markets still shouted with color and chaos, the rich still toasted their champagne in hidden towers. But for Daniel, everything felt different. Each sunrise was no longer an enemy. Each quiet moment with his father was a miracle. His father was still weak, his steps slow, But sometimes Daniel would catch him smiling at the smallest things, the taste of hot tea, the warmth of morning light across the floor. After years of darkness, even shadows seemed precious. One evening, as the Hermiton wind brushed dust across the streets, Daniel returned from work. Simple labor, nothing glamorous, but honest. He found his father sitting at the window, a blanket across his knees. The old man's voice was soft, almost reverent. "Do you hear it? The sound of life outside. I used to dream of this sound when I thought I'd never hear it again." Daniel sat beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then his father whispered, "I lost so much, but I did not lose you. That is enough." Daniel swallowed hard, blinking back tears. Later that week, Amara came. She no longer wore silk or jewels. Her clothes were simple, her hair tied back. She carried no guards, no weight of family prestige. When Daniel opened the door, she stood quietly, almost shyly, as though uncertain if she belonged. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't see what was happening, or maybe I refused to see. But I want to try, to be someone better than the daughter of lies." Daniel's father welcomed her inside without hesitation. He said, "Truth makes family, more than blood or wealth ever could." That night, the three of them shared a meal. Rice, beans, nothing special. Yet laughter, hesitant at first, rose between them like smoke rising from a long-dead fire. Amara's smile was no longer the polished mask of high society, but something raw, uncertain, and real. As the night deepened, Daniel stepped outside. The city stretched before him, restless and endless, its skyline scattered with light. The air smelled of earth and dust, of possibility. He thought of the boy he had been, hungry, powerless, certain he had no place in the world of the powerful. He thought of the man he was becoming, scarred, yes, but unbroken, carrying a truth that could not be buried. Behind him, he heard his father's soft laugh, Amara's voice answering. It was fragile, like glass, but it was there. Daniel lifted his face to the night sky. For the first time in years, the future did not terrify him. It was wide, uncertain, but alive. And in that uncertainty lived hope.